anything. My God is so great. My God can do anything. My God is so great. Here we go now. My God is so great, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so great, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so great, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so great, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do. There's nothing my God cannot do.
Well, hey everyone, I'm Pastor Charles, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be spending this time with you. Don't you just love a good story? What are some of your favorite stories? Growing up, I had a book that I used to keep going back to because I loved the adventures so much. I especially loved it when the hero of the story triumphed over his enemies and brought them to justice. Well, as good as your favorite story is, I've got one even better for you this morning. This morning, I'm going to tell you about the greatest story ever. It's the greatest story ever because it's about a very mighty hero, and it's about you and me. It's an exciting adventure and a daring plan to rescue people who would otherwise be crushed by their enemies. Wouldn't you want to be a part of a story like that? First, let me tell you about the hero. It's not Iron Man, it's not Captain America, it's not the Incredible Hulk, it's not Spider-Man. In fact, he's stronger, smarter, quicker, sharper, and wiser than any other hero. He is the best and the strongest and the most powerful and the smartest and the wisest and the most loving hero ever. And he never does anything wrong or makes any bad decisions. He's the ultimate hero. Can you guess who it is? Let me give you some clues. He has always existed. He doesn't need anyone else to exist. In fact, through him, everything else exists. He never changes. The hero who he has always been is the hero he will always be. He doesn't get old. He never ages. He can be in more than one place at the same time. He is everywhere. In fact, there's no place you could go that he's not already there. Not only that, but there's nothing you could tell him that he doesn't already know. There's no secret that you can keep from him, and you can't surprise him with anything because he knows all there is to know. He knows the future, the past. He knows them perfectly. He knows the deepest longing of your heart, the things that make you happy, and the saddest things in your life, as well as the things that can scare you. This hero can do anything he wants to. There's no one stronger than him. There's no one who can stop him. There's no one who can defeat him, and there's nothing too hard for him. All power belongs to him, and any power in the world exists because he gives power to whomever he wants. With the word of his power, he holds everything together. That's awesome. Do you know who this hero is yet? Yes, of course you do. It's God. You knew that already, didn't you? Wouldn't you agree that he is the best hero? Plus, all the other heroes, they're cool, but they're pretend. They're make-believe. Iron Man, he's just a middle-aged guy in a pretend suit. He can't really fly. Not unless maybe you stuck him inside a catapult and launched him into the air. Then he could fly for about 5 seconds. Thor, he's just a good-looking, ripped Australian dude with a plastic hammer. Doctor Strange, well, the magic isn't real. He's just a weirdo with a cape and a snarky attitude. But God is different. He's real. He's the one who made the world, and not only this earth, but the entire universe. He made it with a word. He made it out of nothing. He simply said, "Let there be," and everything sprang into existence just with His command. I can't even make coffee with a word. Wouldn't you want to know a hero like that? Boy, I sure would. And here's the thing. God made us so that we can know Him. Not only know about Him, but really know Him and be close to Him and be loved by Him and enjoy communion with Him. Communion is a wonderful word that means togetherness. Communion is the close sharing of friendship with someone. If you're best friends with someone, you can say that you have communion or togetherness with them. You share ideas and thoughts and the things that make you happy and the things that fill your heart with excitement. Well, God made you and me so that we can have this togetherness, this communion with Him. Right in the very beginning, when God created the world, He also created man on the sixth day. Do you remember that? Genesis 1, verse 26 to 28 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that moves on the earth.' God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. And God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over all the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" What an amazing verse. Of all that He created, only man was made in His image. That means out of everything He made, man was set aside and made special. God made him in a special way that is like God in certain ways. Like God is good, man can share in that goodness. Like God is righteous, man can be righteous. Like God is love, man can be loving. Have you ever looked up at the moon when it's full and seen it shining? Did you know that the moon isn't really shining at all? And really the moon is just reflecting the sun's light? That brightness we see from the moon is acting like a giant mirror. Well, in the same way, man is able to reflect God's goodness and His righteousness and His love. That's what it means to be made in God's image. We reflect who God is. And God gave us His image so that we can have communion with Him and have togetherness with Him. Having communion with God meant that God wasn't only our Creator, but that man could call on Him at any time. Just think, having a hero like God, someone so great and powerful and wise and good who loves you and is always available. Imagine having that same hero as a personal friend, someone to talk to at any time, someone to call for help when you're in trouble, or if you need wisdom or strength, or if you're feeling sad and lonely or overwhelmed. And that's exactly what man had with God. But then something terrible happened. It's the day that sin entered the world. You probably remember the story. When God made mankind, He started in the beginning with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve had communion with God. They lived in togetherness with Him in a place called Eden. They were happy. Everything was perfect until one day a serpent showed up in Eden, and he tempted Adam and he tempted Eve to disobey God. God had given Adam and Eve only one commandment. He said, "Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." But Adam and Eve were tempted to eat the fruit because it looked beautiful and tasty. And the serpent, who was really Satan, told them that the fruit would make them super smart as God. For Adam and Eve, having God as their friend, their hero, wasn't enough. They wanted to be exactly like God. Their hearts grew proud as they chose disobedience over communion with God. They chose their own sin rather than knowing this wonderful, powerful, great, and awesome and loving God. How sad. What a tragedy. And Satan had actually been lying to Adam and Eve. Eating the fruit didn't make Adam and Eve smart like God. It made them die. In the moment they ate of the fruit, Adam and Eve's bodies started dying, just like God said. But worse than that, they no longer had communion with God. They went from having God as their hero to having God as their enemy. It was the worst day ever. It was the day that sin came into the world, and it changed the relationship that Adam and Eve had with God. More than that, it changed the relationship that you and I would have with God one day, because sin, like a contagious, lethal disease, spread to all men because everyone sinned. And so the greatest story ever begins with the worst day ever. God made man for communion, togetherness with Him. But man chose disobedience over obedience and went from having friendship with the greatest hero, from having God as friend, to having God as his enemy. Not only that, all of Adam's descendants, you and me, were tainted by sin as well. Sin and death spread to all of us. And that's really bad news. And if I left the story there, it wouldn't be the greatest story ever. It would be the worst story ever. But the story doesn't just have bad news. It has good news. Really good news. And we're going to find out all about that really good news. See you tomorrow.
Hi kids, my name is Dr. Elon McSheldon McSmart, and I'm going to be performing a science experiment for you today. In front of me, I have these vials of clear, crystal pure water and ink. And sin's often been compared to an ink stain within water, and we're going to see if that is true today. So we're going to take some of this ink and just put a little bit here in this glass and see what happens. Just a drop. Ah. Oh my goodness, would you look at that? This is entirely, I can't even tell the difference between the two anymore. This is wow. That's wild. The water looks exactly like the ink. It's become stained and blotted by it. And you know, kids, this is a lot actually how sin works in our lives, right? We're made by God to be like this once clean and pure vial of water. But as sin entered into our lives and into the world, it blotted and stained us, and it brought guilt and shame. And so we're no longer pure as we were created to be, but we've been marked by our disobedience. And not only is it just us, but if you saw, this ink corrupted the entire vial of water. Sin marks every human being. Wow, what an amazing experiment.
Has anyone ever told you no? Is no always a bad thing? Will you join me this week as we learn about a woman by the name of Amy Carmichael? This is a true life story of a missionary who lived in India and worked in India in the 1800s. In her story, you're going to find out why no is not always such a bad thing. Amy was born in Northern Ireland. She was the oldest of 7 brothers and sisters, and she loved colors. Her favorite color was blue. What's your favorite color? Tell someone next to you. In Amy's family, everyone had blue eyes. That is, everyone except Amy. This made Amy so sad. She wanted to have blue eyes like the rest of her family. Amy had beautiful brown, bright eyes and full of mischief, but they did not make her happy. Amy grew up in a Christian home like many of you who are watching today. She grew up learning about God and how he sent his one and only son Jesus into the world to save people from sin. As a teenager, Amy made a decision to give her life to Christ. Have you ever heard people say that before? Give your life to Christ? Do you know what it means? Amy understood that she was a sinner. She knew she had broken God's laws and rules and that she deserved to be punished. Amy had learned that Jesus, God's only son, came into the world to save people from their sins, and anyone who believes in them could be saved. She understood that. Following Jesus made her a part of God's family. So that's what it means when it talks about giving your life to Christ. She was forgiven and a part of God's family. Amy was willing to go wherever God wanted her to go and to do whatever God wanted her to do. Every night when Amy was little, her family would gather around and they would pray together. Every night at the end of the prayer, Mom would say, "God always answers prayers." Amy was about 3 or 4 when she came up with a bright idea. She said, "Well, if God always answers prayers, I can ask God to give me blue eyes." So that night, she said a very serious prayer asking God to change her brown eyes and make them blue. She went to bed expecting to wake up with blue eyes. When she woke up in the morning, the first thing she did was run to the bathroom to look in the mirror at her eyes, and to her disappointment, she still had brown eyes. I want to ask you, is no an answer to prayers? Well, I brought a song with me today to help us think about prayer and how God answers prayers. Now this song, some of you have sung it before with me. Where would you see something like this? When you're driving with your parents in the car, you might see a stop sign, or stop, I say it a signal. When you see the red, it means to stop. You see the yellow, it means to wait, and green means to go. This song can help us think about the ways God answers prayers. Red is a reminder that God says no to the things we're asking for sometimes. Is it because he's mean or doesn't love us? No, it's exactly the opposite. He often tells us no because the things that we're asking for are not a part of his plan for our lives. You see, God knows everything and he knows what's best. And sometimes the things we're asking for aren't good for us, or it's not the right time. And that's why we sometimes have a wait to the things we're asking for. It can remind us that the things we're asking for, maybe we're not ready for, maybe we're not old enough, or it's not God's perfect timing. I have to say, in my life, more often do I get a no and a wait answer than I get a yes answer. But we do love it when God says yes, because that means it's God's time for those plans to be worked out in our lives. Sometimes it takes a long time to get a yes, and sometimes we'll never get a yes because the answer is no. But I want you to know it's wonderful that we can trust God to answer the prayer just right for us. I'm going to sing this song with you, and I want you to help me. And some of you know it because you've sung it with us before here in Kindred Kids. And when I pat my leg 3 times, you're going to clap those 3 times instead of pat your leg, all right? Those of you who know it, sing it out loud and proud. Goes like this. Sometimes God answers yes when I pray. Sometimes God answers wait when I pray. Sometimes God answers no just because he loves me so, for I know God always answers when I pray. Isn't it good to know that God is hearing and answering our prayers at all times? Well, when Amy was old enough, she decided that God was calling her to be a missionary to India. Do any of you know anything about India? I researched and got some fun facts for you about India. Some are informational and some are just fun. First of all, do you know how many people live in India? Anybody? 1.3 billion people live in India. And half of that population is under the age of 25 years old. Something else that's interesting, there's 5 languages that I could find, and there's many other dialects as well. But I couldn't even say the different languages to you. Just know there's 5 different ones. Here's another fun fact. Cows are believed holy or divine in India. If a cow wanders into your garden that you've been working on all winter or all summer and decides to eat your cabbage, you can't stop it because it's holy. If he decides to come into your house, you have to let him come in. You can't stop him. I don't know about you, but if I was a cow, I'd want to be born in India. One last fun fact. If you are a police officer in India, you can make more money if you grow a mustache. That's crazy, isn't it? Mr. Edwards would make some money because he has a big mustache. I want to take you and a look at the globe, and I want you to see where India is on the map. Right here, we see the United States of America. And I'm going to take you all the way around the globe, all the way to this little spot right here, which is India. That's where 1.3 billion people live. It's crazy, right? It's a little place for that many people. Well, I want you to know when Amy arrived in India, she realized quickly that she had some things to learn. First, she needed to learn the languages, not just one, but 5. And she had to be able to talk to the people in their own dialect so that she could tell them about the one true and living God. Second, she realized that she needed to learn about the customs or the way the people lived. They did things very differently than Amy was used to. The people of India looked different, they ate different, they dressed different, and they saw Amy as an outsider. Amy knew that the people of India worshiped false gods or idols. All you had to do was walk out into the streets, into the neighborhoods, and you would see idols everywhere and temples where people worshiped. Now, Amy wanted to know what was going on inside those temples, and she really wanted to learn how the people worshiped so she could understand how to share the true God with them. But she quickly found out, as a foreigner, she was forbidden inside the temple. Well, this made Amy think a minute and pray. She thought and prayed and thought and prayed, and finally, she came up with a plan. She did some experimenting with the most unusual thing, coffee. She got them to the grounds were just the right consistency with a little bit of water and oil, and then she'd rub it all over her arms and her face, anything that the people would see, and it would actually dye her skin a light tan like the people of India. Another thing she did is she bought a sari. And a sari is a long scarf. It's actually much bigger than the scarf I brought today. And she practiced using it to look like the ladies in India. So she would put it over her head, and you tucked it under your arm in one side, and over the top. She actually got really good at it, not like Mrs. Edwards. And then she could go out into the city and into the byways, and she looked just like the Indian people. When she looked in the mirror, she couldn't even believe her own eyes. She looked just like the Indian women. One of her friends said to her, "Amy, it's a good thing you have brown eyes. You look just like the Indian women." Those words made Amy's heart jump. She realized when she was asking for blue eyes as a little girl, that God had a plan for her perfect brown eyes. They were to help carry out his work for him in India with the Indian people. Amy began to venture out into the crowds in her new disguise. But I want you to know, at first it was a disguise, but very quickly she realized if she wanted to get in with the people, she needed to look like them and act like them. So she put away all of her clothes that she wore when she was back home and dressed like the Indian people from that day forward. At first, when she went out in her disguise, she was very nervous, kind of stiff and not sure if people were going to notice. But they didn't. She realized quickly nobody even looked at her. She realized she looked very much like the Indian people. But her next plan was now to find out what goes on in those temples. So one morning she woke up and she decided that today was the day. She spent her morning praying and asking God for guidance and protection. Then she put on her outfit and she walked towards the temple. She confidently walked right past the outer courts and then past the priests who guarded it. Now she was inside for the first time. I want you to know it was dark. There was yellow torches around, and it was casting shadows all over the walls. In one side of the room, there was a large idol, and around the idol were these little bowls full of oil with wicks burning in them hung on the walls. This was one of 33 million idols or false gods that the Hindu people worshipped. Sadly, these were all made by men's hands. They couldn't hear, they weren't alive, and they couldn't help the people when they prayed to them. This broke Amy's heart, knowing these people worshipped something that couldn't help them, a false god. She knew the one true and living God who could hear and answer their prayers, who created the heavens and the earth and all the people on the earth. She knew that God wanted them to know about his great love for them. Unfortunately, these people were lost in darkness, like that dimly lit room Amy stood in. Right then and there, Amy prayed for more opportunities to tell people about God's love for them. One day while Amy was in the village, she was shopping and she noticed some sounds coming from behind her. People were shouting and they were throwing flowers in the air and some were singing, and quickly people were moving out of the way to make room for this wooden cart that was rolling down the middle of the street. On this cart were little girls from the ages of 4 to about 10 years old. They were beautiful. They had long black hair that was oiled and straightened with pretty flower wreaths on their head. They wore beautiful purple silk gowns and they had gold bracelets on their wrists and their ankles. This should be exciting for them, you would think, with all the excitement everybody was having around them. But when she looked into the faces of the girls, she saw fear and tears, and the girls were scared. The cart rolled right past Amy and all the people that were shouting and singing. They rolled right up to the gates of the temple. The temple opened the gates, and the cart rolled inside, and the gates locked behind it. Amy realized these little girls were prisoners. They had been taken from their families and were forced to serve the idols in this temple, and they were slaves for the rest of their lives. This broke Amy's heart. Amy began asking God to show her how to help the children of India, especially these temple girls. One of many children that the time that Amy was going to spend in India, there was one girl who was her first girl. Her name was Purina. She lived in the temple across the river from Amy's home in India. And one day, Purina decided she was going to run away. She got out of the gates unnoticed, but she ran 20 miles. It took her 3 days and 3 nights. She ran all the way back home to where her mother lived. When she got there, she wrapped her arms around her mother and she begged for her mother to keep her there. But her mother's face was mean and not happy to see her. And when she looked at Purina, she shoved her away and gave her back to the temple priest, or the temple women who had followed her there. Poor Purina. She was taken back to the temple, and these temple women supposedly served the gods. They took hot irons and they put them in the coals of the fire. And they made Purina put her hands out. And they put those hot rods of iron in Purina's palms of her hands and burned her hands. They told her this would remind you to never run away again. Oh, they hurt so bad. And then one of the ladies said to her, "Soon you'll be married to one of the temple gods and you will serve him forever." Purina was in so much pain. She cried herself to sleep that night, wondering how she could live this way. Poor Purina. What will happen to her and other girls like her who lived in the temples? Will they have to stay in there with those temple women and the false gods? Would someone ever help them? Will Amy figure out a way to help the girls like Purina? You're going to have to come back tomorrow to find out.